researcher of distributed ledgers, and after several blockchain projects working on both here and as well as outside of the US, he then dove into creating Homebloc. So if you want to dive into that a little bit before we move forward, we'd love to hear.
Thanks. Yes, I'm Joshua Peng. Actually, I worked here like 3 years ago. I was a structural engineer, and so when I came into like a one event that was talking about a vehicle like 3 years ago, I thought it was very interesting because of how I got into this industry. And so later, as I studied blockchain deeper, I feel like, okay, this has something to do with my own major, or like a real estate stuff. So I think it's very interesting. That's so after like you study with the blockchain projects, I think I probably should have tried it by myself. That's how I started. So I quit my job here, and I went back to China. So I got an office over there, and here, so I partner with the process. We have office here, we have office in China, we have office in Singapore. So.
Awesome, sweet. What is tokenization and how do you define it?
Well, I think the tokenization, it might be two definitions. The first one is the tokenization to the data. So it's more like, so it's slightly different from tokenizing the assets. So if we are talking about a tokenization, so it's more referred to, okay, this part of data with very sensitive, let's say personal data, right? You don't want people to have access to it. Then on top of that, so we do the tokenization, which is, okay, another second layer. So even people hack this layer, so they couldn't get your very sensitive personal data. So this is type of like a data security type of tokenization. But if we are talking about tokenizing like assets, so it's slightly different. Let's say we break the assets into a few portions, and then you're able to buy like a fraction of it. So that's the definition for like a tokenizing assets.
Yeah, nice.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically with that, tokenizing assets, whereas I think if you can, dive into the side of where Ara works more or less on assets and more on digital base.
I think it's slightly different between like a tokenization and the encryption. So encryption is once people hack the data, they solve the puzzle, they are able to see your data, able to see the personal information or something. But with the tokenization, if we did breach, so people cannot see it. I think that's the difference between tokenization and the encryption. That's the one.
Awesome. What role will tokenization play in the real estate market?
Yes, so basically what Homebloc does is basically two parts. The first part is we call it the space usage rights trading. Let's say if we book a hotel or like an Airbnb, so basically what we are buying is it's sort of like a room usage rights, so like a room usage crypto rights or something like that. So nowadays we're able to use a token to represent that. So the internet model is more like, okay, you are buying an asset, but you are putting in like a Booking or Expedia's pocket. But when you want to sell it, let's say my flights get delayed, I don't want to go to the hotel anymore. So if you want to cancel it, they'll say, okay, no, you cannot cancel it. You have to either pay like 50% of the price or something. So which means, okay, you bought that token, you bought that like assets, but you are not able to execute your rights. So with Homebloc, which is, okay, you are able to trade this type of room space usage rights free, and the price is just according to this market supply and demand, very simple model. So that's one thing we are doing now. So later on, we are starting with the hotel first. Later on, we are going to do so like there will be type of short-term and long-term as well. If we are moving on to like a second step, so we are getting into like a tokenizing real estate ownership. So basically it's more like, we are going to have decentralized ownership. So now that you are able to buy either 100% or you cannot afford it. So with us, you are able to buy a fraction of it. Let's say from 0 to 100%, it just according to how much money you have, and you should be able to buy whatever percentage you want. So the link between these two systems is more like, you have decentralized platform for like ownership, and then the returns is number one, the price of the house increase by itself. The second one is the rental. Because we already have a rental, so that's how the two systems related. So that's basically the whole picture of Homebloc in terms of tokenizing space usage and also the ownership. I hope this is clear to you guys.
What are like the top 3 advantages of tokenization?
I think number one, I would say the liquidity of the assets. So let's say real estate gets like about 230 trillion USD. So that's the total market, but I think this market is not very liquidable. So that's how blockchain comes into play, which is able to add a lot of liquidity to the market. So in the future, you should be able to buy, a fraction of real estate in China. So it's unimaginable today, but I think eventually it's going to get there. It's more like the internet. 2 years ago, so you are able to see the news or something from China, all over the place. So I think it's going to happen. The second thing is, I think blockchain is going to add a lot of, the data security. Let's say we have a lot of personal data, so all the data people produce or use should be, the ownership should be belongs to users. Let's say if you put a room on the platform on Homebloc, you should own that data. And so it's Homebloc responsibility to give you the ownership. And later on, if some third party wants to use this data, and the Homebloc should say, you need to pay certain fraction of tokens in order to have access to this data, but it's without your name or something. That's for the surveys of. So that's the second type of business we are trying to do. I think the third one is sort of like more like a smart contract type of application. So basically, if you look at the current internet booking system or all the internet banking system, so because let's say room usage rights or ownership is an asset, so it's either you own it or I own it. We cannot duplicate or something, but with the current information type of application, let's say banks, actually once we go to bank, what it shows and the bank's ledger's information. So once we need to withdraw the money, you need a third party to check the information at the account. You need people to check that information. So, but with Bitcoin, I don't need people to check the information because what's recorded on the ledger is the value. So we're able to just, without any third-party check, the value gets transferred. So, which means with our platform, let's say the current Airbnb or booking something, they need people to check the booking information, right? If you cannot book one room twice because it's sort of an access type of application. So with our platform, we are able to use a smart contract to just use a smart contract to trade the ERC-721. That's the token we are using. So the smart contract is able to execute by itself. Let's say, if you send one 10-home token to the platform, to this smart contract, and then the room usage rights of this room is going to send it to your wallet. Which means once you own this ERC-721, it shows, okay, I have the usage rights of this room tonight, and this whole process is without human operation. So I think that's a great thing, and we are able to lower the industry cost a lot. So
Fascinating. It's really cool.
So yeah, I think that's the power of smart contract, which is machines is able to run in the assets transformation or circulation by itself without needing humans to check the information. Because for all the internet platform, if we are talking about a transfer value, it needs a third party, like people, to verify the information and that book or and even your database. It needs the humans to check. That's how banking system works now. But with Bitcoin, it doesn't need anybody to check the ledger. I think that's a major difference if we're talking about internet type of company and a blockchain type of company. So that's why people are saying all those applications of the internet could be redo. Just do it over again in all type of applications, yes. And speaking of the realism, I believe it's going to, it might not be Homebloc, eventually it's going to be a huge company in this realistic area. Because if you look at, just look at the internet companies. So the purpose of the tool, the function of the internet is to reduce the information circulation price. Right? It takes money to get information, and now it's free. But if we are taking a look at the biggest internet company now, you get Amazon, you used to have like a Yahoo, and you get Google, you get Facebook. It exactly happens in China. Unbelievable, because this type, information, like the internet as a tool, is up to humans to put what type of information which is important to you to the internet. Americans choose the companies, Amazon you guys pick, right? Google you pick, Yahoo you pick, or Facebook you pick. In China, Chinese do the same thing, the same category. So let's just use this logic for like a blockchain. So let's predict which area of tokenization is going to be a huge company 20 years later. If we look at the assets, okay, let me give you a picture. So the humans get like $70 trillion of stocks. That's why we are tokenizing stock. And you get like 100 trillion USD of like debts or like bonds stuff. You get 230 trillion trillion of real estate, which means 65% of human assets is in like housing real estate. You get to be one company to put the most important human assets on the internet and to be freely traded. So that's why I believe in this area, at least there will be one company like Amazon, Google, Facebook type of application. So that's.
Wow.
Yeah, that's basically if we. I just share with you guys. That's how the basic logic behind Homebloc. That's why I believe at least this direction could be very big. It might not be us, but it's going to be very big. If you guys are investors, pick lanes, I get to pick one of those. Yes, just like a horse racing something, right? So I think this is so internet is to information, so blockchain is to assets. If we link those two together, you are able to predict 20 years from now. Let's say we go back 20 years, before. Let's just do a startup. Which area of information you want to start with? It's going to be like a goods, like Amazon, or like your friend's information, or once information already exploded, you need a Google type of, to handling the information for you. So eventually, I think Homebloc is going to be more like assets management company. And we are managing the most, like 65% of human assets. So that's a OPG.
So our final question of the night, please describe the process of asset tokenization. It's a big one, so we have some time.
Okay, so I think it's slightly different. If we're talking about like online and offline. For online, it's very easy. Let's say if we log into a Steemit, you write an article. So once you write it, which is already sort of like a token or already became an asset to you. So that's how the online tokenization happens. If we are talking about offline, let's say like a gold and a house, like a ruby or something. So which the processes number one is you need to figure out the very clear physical ownership first. As you need to have the title of your house. And then once you have the title of the house, it's more like a trust transformation, let's put it this way. So let's get like a government approved like a title first. And then once we got that title, okay, we probably just put that house on our platform. And we put a title to the third party to just for like to just put it over there and as a proof, okay, we have the title of this, and then people are going to invest in either Bitcoin or home token gas, and to buy the house. And then in this case, okay, so once we collect those money, then we issue a token. As the issue year, say 721. Let's say for this house, we issue 100 tokens. Each token represents like a 1/100th of the ownership. And that's how the process is. Yes. So I think it looks very simple, but the most difficult part is how eventually we are going to forget about those paper like titles. It's more, I can give you an example, it's about like as I talked to you guys, about like how we are moved from gold to like a cash. So, back in the old days, if you want to use, in the very beginning of the cash, you probably need a gold. Let's say, it's just how much gold on this piece of paper, that's why you are able to use the paper. So, but later on, because the efficiency of the paper is much greater than the gold to carry around, so eventually people are going to forget about the gold. Let's put this process into like a title transformation. It's going to be exactly the same. In the very beginning, yes, if you want to buy the token of the ownership, yes, I need to see the title. Where is the title? Because then I'm going to trust it, right? If I cannot see the title, then I'm not going. This probably is just a fraud or something. So, but later on, so people go to believe it because eventually I think the token is more efficient than the physical, like the paper. You have to go through a lot of trouble to like do paper transformation something, right? So if we do token transformation, it's more efficiency. So eventually we are going to forget about the titles. So which means maybe our next generation or next generation, they just recognize the token. Okay, this token is the ownership proof of this house. Our generation is going through the transition now. That's why we need this paper-based title. It's more like we need a gold to show, okay, this is $1. That's how it works, I guess.
Wonderful. Well, I think we can give everyone up here a round of applause.